Hi, Dr. Athan here. Today we're doing a pre-flight, November 9526 Gulf. A pre-flight is an important part of every flight. Check the airplane, make sure it's airworthy, and make sure it's not going to kill you when you go flying. So the first thing we want to do is prep the plane for a pre-flight. First thing I'm going to do is remove the control lock on the yoke. This is a lock that keeps the airplane stable, keeps the ailerons from moving in the wind while the airplane's parked. Second thing I'm going to do is turn my master switch on and drop my flaps. Master off, check my fuel both, and I'm going to come back here and grab my fuel strainer and my fuel measuring stick, which are going to allow me to measure how much fuel we have in the tank and the quality of the fuel. All right, come on out around here. First thing I'm going to do is climb up on top of here, and I'm going to check the left side tank. Now, this is my method. I've used this method for 40 years on my pre-flight. It's basically the same one I use. We'll compare it at the end of this video with the actual checklist in the airplane. So the first thing we're going to do is, while we're up here, the very first thing is what we came up here to do, is check the fuel tank cap. Make sure this is in. Make sure it's in and tight. I can see fuel in there. We want to make sure we have fuel in the airplane. Plane has two fuel tanks, a left tank and a right tank. This is the port side, starboard side. I can visually see fuel. We're going to sample the fuel in just a minute, but in the meantime, I want to take this fuel measuring device, which is nothing but a fancy straw. It's a thick plastic straw with degradations on it, or gradations on it, and it's hollow. So I'm going to stick the pipe of the tube down into the tank. It's going to come to rest on the bottom of this little platform down there. Then I'm going to cover the center hole and bring it up, and with that method I can detect and determine about how many gallons I have. It looks like about 20 gallons of fuel in this tank. Now I have my fuel selector on both. If I have 20 gallons here, it's likely I have 20 gallons on that side, which means I have a total of about 40 gallons of fuel in this airplane. All right, we'll do it again. We'll drop the fuel out. I'll check it again. Double check it, and there, in fact, it does have 20 gallons. So I know I have 20 gallons of fuel, at least it looks like fuel so far, in this tank. Now while I'm up here, I'm going to check a few other things while I'm here. I'm going to check the length of the wing. I'm going to check the back part of the airplane, looking down at the rudder and the horizontal stabilizer. Just see if I notice anything unusual. I'm looking at the antennas. I'm looking at the structural integrity of the airplane. I'm going to look back out over the starboard wing, make sure nothing over there looks out of place. And I'm going to glance once at the front and the nose of the airplane and just see if there's anything at all that looks remotely out of place. All right, looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and step down now and continue the pre-flight. Next thing we want to do is check the pedostatic system. This is the device that actually allows us to measure the airspeed of the airplane while it's in the air. There's a static port here. You look at this thing and make sure that little hole right there is not occluded or in any way blocked up. We look up here, we remove the pitot cover. This is our pitot tube. Again, it works in conjunction with the static port and determines the actual speed of the airplane in flight. Make sure this is not plugged up, make sure there's no bugs in there. There've actually been incidences where bugs have collected in there and caused the airplane to crash. Now we want to begin our check of the wing. We look at the leading edge of the wing. This is a vent hole. I'm going to check my leading edge, make sure there's no dings or bangs. This is our strut, make sure the strut's in place. Come down here. This is our stall warning horn, or our stall warning indicator. What this does is if the leading edge of the airplane achieves a certain angle of attack, this will sense a negative pressure, and it'll blow a horn. It'll turn a horn on in the cockpit and tell you you're in a stall. You're in an aerodynamic stall, which is not a safe thing to be in ever. So we're going to untie the airplane. Just bring this down. Just kind of loop it down on the ground and continue our pre-flight inspection. I can look at my lights. These are LEDs I noticed. They look good, nothing to be concerned about. Shroud looks good. Continue with the leading edge. Wing tip looks good, lights look good. I'm going to now check my aileron. I'm going to pull down on this aileron, and I'm going to notice that aileron there pulls up on the other side. And likewise, if I push up, I notice that aileron pushes down. This looks good. I'm going to look at my hinges. I've got hinges here. Make sure my hinges are all in place. My struts are in place. This thing is working and working freely. No occlusion, no impediments. This is my flap. Make sure my flap's in place. It's not going anywhere. Check my strut. Now I'm going to check my left tire. Take a peek inside. Looks good. Hub looks good. I'm going to feel the tire. Make sure I got some tread. Make sure it's not flat. It feels real good. Nice thick tread. Check the cowling. Check my foot prop. Now I'm going to check the fuel. I'm actually going to draw fuel from the tank and inspect it visually, looking for water or any other contaminants. Push this up. Push that stick up in the hole, and now it's filling. It's filling that fuel indicator, that fuel strainer with fuel. The fuel is blue. It's blue by design. We color the fuel so that we know which fuel type we're putting in this particular plane. You don't want to put the wrong fuel in the plane. It'll kill you. We're going to check 5 ports. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, notice 2 things here. Number 1, I've got a good sample of fuel. It looks nice and clean and blue. It doesn't look to be any water in there. You'd see it. It separates like oil and vinegar. The other thing notice I've done, I've only filled the fuel strainer halfway. The reason is because when I go to the other side of the airplane, I'm going to fill the rest of it up with fuel from that side, and I'll be able to get a full visual inspection of the fuel quality in both wings, in both tanks. All right, we continue now. We look at the fuselage. Now move back and check the empennage. Make sure our baggage door is shut and locked. We don't want this thing coming open in flight. Check the antennas. Check the back end of the plane. Just kind of look around, looking for anything that looks unusual. I can check here the leading edge of my vertical stabilizer, my horizontal stabilizer, my empennage. Come back down here, check the leading edge of my horizontal stabilizer. I'm going to check my elevator now. Make sure this elevator is moving full deflection, up and down. Check it a couple of times. Check the hinges. Check the cable. Check the wires, anti-static cables. Looks good. Hinge looks good. I'm going to check the wire here. Make sure all my wires are in place. I'll check 4 wires in the hinge. 1, 2, 3, and then 1 like this on the other side. These control my, this hinge controls my elevator, and these wires control my rudder. I'm not going to set this down. Actually, I don't have to set it down. I can just reach up under here and untie the back of the plane. You don't want to try to take off without untying the plane. You're not going to go anywhere. Here we go. While I'm here, I'm going to check the rudder on this side. Hinge, hinge, hinge. Looks good. These are just simple nuts and bolts. There's nothing fancy here. This is not a. It's a simple mechanical structure that can fail. This is why they're inspected frequently. Looks good. Full deflection on the rudder. Check the same thing on this side. You can never over-check an airplane, especially during pre-flight. I don't think I've ever pre-flighted a plane in the 40 years I've been flying and found anything that has prevented me from going flying. Now, there's been other issues like weather and things like that, but there's always a first time. In fact, I did find a rag one time in the engine, which kept me from going, although it was just a matter of pulling the rag out of the engine during the pre-flight. Again, elevator. This is my trim tab. Make sure the struts are all in place. Check my cable over here. Looks good. Elevator looks good. Functioning. Hinge, hinge, hinge. Looks real good. Horizontal stabilizer. Checking good for leading edge. Empennage coming on back up. Looks good. Antenna. Looks good. Up under here now. Check my flap on this side. Looks solid. Checking my strut, looks awesome. We got a nice little airplane taxiing out. This is my aileron on this side looks good. Check the strut, check the hinges. Always checking, checking, checking. You're looking for something wrong. You never assume this plane is airworthy. You're always looking for something wrong. Leading edge of the airplane. No dings, no bird hits, no rocks. Looks smooth. Looks good. All right, check my strut, untie my plane, and then we're going to check the fuel in this tank. Check 5 ports, just like before, starting from the inboard. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And again, we're going to look closely at the fuel and make sure there's nothing in there that even remotely resembles water or any kind of contaminants. If you see anything floating in there, any kind of debris, any kind of discoloration at all, that's reason to stop, and we're done. We're not going anywhere. Looks good so far. Check my tire. I got full air. I got good tread. Check the hub. Looks good. Now I'm going to get up here on this side and check the fuel tank cover cap on this side. Do the same thing I did over there on the other side. Pull the cap off. I see a full tank. Now I'm going to take this fuel in this fuel strainer. I'm going to dump it in here so we don't waste it and drop it on the ground and pollute the environment. Oops. Didn't like that. These tanks should be more leveled off. This one's a little bit high. All right. Now, the two most important fluids in any airplane, in this order, are the oil and the fuel. So we're going to check the oil first. The oil is what keeps the engine running. You run low on oil, you have no engine. Pop the cap, unscrew the dipstick, give it an initial wipe, and we dump it back in there all the way in, and then bring it back out, and we're going to check the oil level, which in this case is between about 7 quarts. You can see it's between 6 and 8, which is exactly where it should be. We got 7 quarts of oil. The oil looks good. It's a visual inspection as well. You want to drop the dipstick back in the engine. Check that one time. If it needs oil, we give it oil. But if we give it oil, we have to wonder where the oil is going. It's nice to always know if you're losing oil and where you're losing it and by how much. That's pretty cool. We're going to check our engine compartment now. What I'm going to do here is I never walk into the plane of the propeller, into the circumference of the propeller. You always keep back in case this thing kicks. You lose a ground on your magneto, this thing could kick and hurt you. So I'm going to look in the engine compartment. What am I looking for? I'm looking for anything. I'm looking for birds. I'm looking for any kind of debris, any kind of towels. I'm looking at the belt, the alternator belt, making sure it's intact, it's not in pieces. Just making sure I got a visual inspection there. I could actually push the propeller through, but look what I'm doing. I'm always leaning back in case that thing kicks. Never getting in its way, because it will win every time. Okay, I'm going to check the front strut, the yoke, and the shock absorber on the front wheel by lifting up on it. All right, it's coming back down nice and neat. There's my intake filter. I do a visual in here as well, making sure there's nothing in there that I don't like. It looks nice and clean. Looks like it's brand new. In fact, this thing has got no oil or grease or anything on it, which looks nice. Check the edge of the prop. Make sure the prop is straight, not bent. Looks fantastic. Everything looks good. We're ready to go. Let's go flying.